This is Bishop Barron. I formed the Word on Fire Institute to respond to what I think is the greatest challenge of our time, namely the rise of the nones, those who have no religious affiliation. This problem is especially acute among the young. Upwards of 40% of those under 30 in our country now claim no religion. And in fact, the number is worse among young Catholics. It's upwards of 50%. We put together some of the best people in the country in theology, in spirituality, in practical evangelism to provide videos that will help shape a community to respond to this problem and become evangelists themselves. We formed, I think, one of the really best state-of-the-art online systems to inform us and to shape us for this important work. Can I invite everyone to join us on this? Get involved in solving this problem. Come on to the Word on Fire Institute and be part of the solution. And God bless you.
Well, all right. Well, welcome to the 1-year anniversary celebration webinar of the Word on Fire Institute. I'm Jared Zimmer, the director of the Word on Fire Institute, and with me is the assistant director, Mr. Matt Nelson.
Hey, everybody.
All right. Well, what we wanted to do today, and here in a little bit, we'll kind of get into the weeds of things, but what we wanted to do today is talk a little bit about what we've done over the past year and what we're hoping to continue to accomplish through the Word on Fire Institute. And we thought, with today being the very special feast day of Saint Therese of Lisieux, I thought maybe we would talk about the fact that we picked October 1st as our launch date last year, and there's a reason for that. Therese of Lisieux is really one of the patronesses of Word on Fire. Her story being a patron of missionaries, and the fact that she never left the convent. She dies at 24, yet becomes a doctor of the church. Her spirituality of the little way really had a major impact on Bishop Barron as he was forming Word on Fire. And so part of what we decided to do is really devote this entire project of the Word on Fire Institute to the little flower. So a lot of times whenever we have new events or something that we're working on, we'll always ask the little flower for intercession. And so what I thought we'd do today is start this webinar in prayer. The reflection that I grabbed was from today's Office of Readings, which of course also includes a journal entry from Therese of Lisieux. And so if you could join me, we'll begin in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. O Jesus, my love, at last I have found my calling. My call is love. Certainly I have found my place in the church, and you gave me that very place, my God. In the heart of the church, my mother, I will be love. And thus I will be all things as my desire finds its direction. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. I was going to say, we were, like, when we were planning to launch the Word on Fire Institute, we actually were ready to go, but we held off for a while because we wanted October 1st to be our launch day.
Yeah.
And I just can't believe it's been a year already.
It's crazy how much time flies. Yeah. And so much has happened over the past 12 months that we want to fill you in on, as well as some of the things we want to continue to do. But I thought maybe first off, I think one of the big moves that happened in the past year is, of course, you coming down here to Texas. And so maybe you could share a little bit about your journey of getting involved in Word on Fire and what brought you all the way down here to good old Texas.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Bishop Barron has always been he's been a key player for me. I'm a revert, as they say. I grew up in a good Catholic family and was one among many that went off to university and during my time in post-secondary studies, fell away from the faith. And so at 25 years old, coming back to the Catholic Church, Bishop Barron was key for me in getting back in touch with the Catholic faith, and especially in the intellectual transformation that followed that initial conversion experience. Word on Fire Ministries was such a key part of that. And then almost 2 years ago now.
Crazy.
Yeah, you and I were were on the phone. You called me up because I had just come out with a new book on reaching the religiously indifferent, and you wanted me to be part of that first round of courses. And so you and I spoke on the phone about coming out to Los Angeles to film a course, and that conversation led to several more conversations that I had no idea were gonna happen. And it was, a while after that you reached out and said, hey, we might have an opportunity here for you at the Word on Fire Institute, which, I swept in a way that offer totally, took my world and flipped it upside down. At the time I was practicing chiropractic, full-time busy practice in rural Saskatchewan in a small town called Shaunavon. And it was
a culture a lot like Texas, actually.
Yeah, it's like a little Texas of Canada. And I was busy fixing people, getting them moving better. And then you reached out and, doing this apologetics work, writing and speaking on the side. And when you reached out and gave me this opportunity to come on board as assistant director, like I said, it flipped my world upside down, but at the same time, it was a really exciting opportunity that my wife Amanda and I, had a lot of praying to do, and that opportunity came around, and we accepted the offer, and here we are, 1 month now in the Texas office. We made the big trek across the continent, really, from Western Canada to Dallas, Texas, just a little over a month ago. So we're here, and it's been a fun year.
One of these days we'll get you to quit saying "a" and start saying "y'all," like a good Texan. So.
Yeah. I don't feel authentically Texan enough yet to say that. But when I got my Texas license plates the other day, I started feeling a little more Texan. But,
Nice. Well, one thing that really just kind of blows my mind about this past year as well, and just to share with all of you, the growth of this institute that's happened over the past 12 months has just been an unbelievable blessing, because, part of what the vision here was, or not part, the vision of this institute was to grow into something that could really affect the culture in a way that is geared by the Word on Fire ethos. And as you've heard Bishop Barron talking about, this idea of a movement, of really kind of taking this idea of a true order out to the world. But what does that mean? And taking a bunch of steps back to try to understand, what does that mean in the modern day? How would that look like in regards to the Word on Fire ethos, et cetera? And we really understood that formation was such a vital aspect of being able to properly pursue this idea of a movement. In order to properly go out in a mission, you have to understand what the mission is, and you really have to understand how the mission thinks. And that's the reason why we launched the Institute and have geared it towards this. And the growth of the Institute over the past 12 months, has literally doubled our expectations, or our kind of thinking through it, particularly when it comes to the growth of students in the Word on Fire Institute. And so, it just has absolutely blown our mind, and we can't thank, all of our students enough. It's just been absolutely wonderful. We have a lively community within the Institute that has just continued to just blossom. One thing that really kind of just continues to blow my mind is the level of production that our producer Joseph Glore out in Los Angeles is able to produce. Matt and I kind of focus in on the content aspect of it, so we're reading over the scripts, we're reaching out to different individuals to be fellows in order to film, and we kind of do all the back end work, and then Joe brings them out to Los Angeles and films. And it's just unbelievable every time we see it, and it just keeps getting better and better and more beautiful. The courses really are something to see. And so a couple of just different highlights, I guess, from this past year. One for you and I think this was the first time you actually met Bishop Barron face to face, was right before we launched. We had a conference for priests out in California, and it was on the craft, the art of preaching. Bishop Barron, I think, is by far one of the greatest preachers of our time. And so to hear from the preacher himself how to preach well, you actually co-emceed with me. And so we threw you right into the fire the first time you met Bishop Barron. Yeah, I remember
every time. So I'd be talking to you, or I'd be talking to Joe Glore when I was in Los Angeles, or talking to somebody from the team. And everyone would just assume that I had met Bishop Barron already. So then when I would mention like, oh yeah, I still haven't met Bishop Barron, you guys would always like have this funny laugh, like, just because people get so starstruck or whatever when they meet him, and it's just, so that was pretty special. I remember you got a text from Father Steve, the CEO of Word on Fire, saying, we're just pulling up. Could you guys come meet us downstairs? And so you and I go down there, and I'm like kind of shaking because I'm going to meet them. And you could see them pulling up in the car, and I could see Bishop Barron's Chicago Cubs hat. So like, oh, that's really him. So shook his hand, and he's just a wonderful, wonderful man, wonderful priest. So.
Yeah, and we had 300 priests gathered together at that event, and we filmed the whole thing, which is actually currently available on Word on Fire Digital. One of the additions that you get as a member of the Institute, and so you can go and see the presentations that Bishop Barron gave during that time. And we met so many awesome young priests that were just truly kind of JP2-esque, in the desire for evangelization and the desire to help the church. And we at Word on Fire consistently hold that we are a JP2 in the Catechism of 1992 or 4, I forget the date now, but in the Catechism of as it is understood by JP2. And so we saw so many young priests that were already understanding that mission and wanting to fulfill that mission. So really great relationships coming out of that conference that continue to bloom.
That was a successful event, and that was our first ever Word on Fire conference of any kind. That particular one was just for priests, and to see 300 on fire priests, over those 3 or 4 days, however long it was just an unreal experience.
Yeah, and that leads right into our actual launch of the Institute. And I remember you flew down to Texas at the old office, and it was you and I sitting in that office,
tiny little office,
just waiting for the thing to launch, and praying our beads and getting prepped for it. But one of the highlights I felt like whenever we launched really was Bishop Barron's course on Hans Urs von Balthasar.
Mm-hmm.
That's somebody that we continue to look to on how we understand, the Second Vatican Council, how we understand theology, etc. What were some of the highlights from that course for you?
Well, I think von Balthasar's theology of love is something that really, there were so many things. It's a long course. There's 12 lessons, which is, pretty much only Bishop Barron gets the long courses, right?
Yeah. So it's about 3 hours worth of the course.
Yeah. It's something, something like what you would, like, I think it was actually based off of his former course that he offered in the seminary. Yeah. So you're getting real formation there, and intellectual and spiritual formation all at once, which I know you'll speak about in a second. But the theology of love, and I think, like, just to give a more concrete example of like how that changed the way I think, with the new translation of the Mass, we say that Jesus descended into hell. And I always thought of that as an interesting change in the language. But what Bishop Barron taught me in his course is, and this again is through the theology of von Balthasar, this is thinking through and seeing the world through the lens of Hans Urs von Balthasar, said that that's appropriate language for the simple fact that God, nobody is ever too far gone for God to reach them. His mercy is infinite. And so, as Bishop Barron has put it, God will go to the very depths of God-forsakenness to reach even the most lost soul. So that means even going into hell. God, you know what I mean? And so, having that understanding really reshaped the way I even experienced the Apostles' Creed. So that was one thing that really stood out to me from that course. What about you?
Mine was really the understanding of a kneeling versus a sitting theology. And so the way that he would explain that is that a sitting theologian is more of just purely academic. And so they're kind of, and there's nothing wrong with that. There is a role in sitting theology of taking it in a more analytic mode and trying to kind of chop it up a little bit and understand it the best you can. But then there is the kneeling theology, which is much more of an understanding of reading through Scripture, reading through the great theologians in a way that is in prayer. And it's always in thinking through that as I'm doing this, I'm in the presence of Christ. And so it's not me coming with an agenda in order to understand these things. Rather, it's to look at these things and allow them to form me. And I've always loved the way Aquinas would talk about, study as a form of prayer.
Yeah.
And so when von Balthasar explained it in that kind of kneeling mode, I think that just gives a different perspective on how, obviously at the Word on Fire Institute, we talk about theology and philosophy all the time. That's what we love to do here in the office, but then also inside the Institute. But in understanding that what we're doing is opening ourselves up to Christ so that he can form us. And the more we can conform to him, the better we can understand him. And so that really stuck out to me.
You can tell, I just want to offer also that you can tell that that's not just like head knowledge for you, but that's something that has changed, maybe not changed, but has affected how you lead in the office. So right. Jared's the director. He's not too tough on us. But he does run a tight ship, and as a team here in the office, I think we work really well together, and for all of the different irons we have in the fire at every moment, I think it's pretty incredible what we're able to accomplish. But one of the non-negotiable parts of our day that you instilled was meeting together first thing, no matter how busy the day is, no matter what we have ahead of us, we all sit down together when we arrive at the office, and we do the office of readings together. And again, like you said, this is such a cerebral place in a way, like where our heads are always up in the clouds talking theology or philosophy or science or whatever it happens to be. And yet we start the day with the non-negotiable team prayer.
So, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, it forms the rest of your day and just puts you the right mindset of what we're doing here is there is a business aspect of it, but this is mission. Yeah. We're here to evangelize and help to form evangelists. So, and speaking of a Bishop Barron course, I'm excited to announce that actually on October 14th, we'll be launching Bishop Barron's next course inside the Institute, which is actually a 12-part series on the theology and the mind, the genius of John Henry Newman, who is actually about to be canonized. And yet another one of our great patrons at Word on Fire, who is now going to be canonized, and we actually have a pretty special event coming up about that. So
Bishop Barron is going to be he'll be in Rome for the canonization, and then he'll be going to Oxford. I'm sure you all know where that is, and he's going to be giving at least a couple special presentations there on Newman. One of those presentations is actually going to be more of like a sit-down Q&A, and I'll be there with Bishop Barron doing that on one of those evenings. So Bishop Barron and I will be sitting down together, and I'll be asking Bishop Barron questions that'll come specifically from our Word on Fire Institute members. So watch for an email coming to you soon where I'll be asking for your questions for Bishop Barron for that Newman event.
And I'm really excited about that course because, Newman, it was such a influence on everything after him, right? So, the Bishop Barron mentions in the course the great quote from John Tracy Ellis, where he says that he's the greatest theologian since Thomas Aquinas. That's a big statement, and personally, I'm actually about to deliver a paper. While you're in Oxford, I'll be in Montgomery, Alabama, delivering a paper on Newman. And so I had to do a lot of studying of him, and it's just absolutely mind-blowing. And so I'm really excited for our Word on Fire Institute members to take this course, particularly because it just provides such a good framework to understand the development of doctrine, to understand especially the grammar of assent. I think that one, as evangelists, is like vitally important to understand kind of the signs and the modes of which we come to an assent of a truth. And so that's what we're trying to do, right?
Yeah. No, there's so much there. I've been steeped in Bishop Barron's course over the last couple of weeks as I prepare for our Oxford events. And to be honest with you, I wasn't a huge Newman expert. I'm still not, but I had a lot to learn. And so being involved with post-production, we got to watch Bishop Barron's lessons over and over as we tweaked things and worked with our post-production team to create this course. But when you're doing that, you're kind of paying attention to fine details, and you're not sitting there necessarily as a student. But over the last couple of weeks, I've had a chance to really approach that course as a student, and it's changing the way I see reality for sure. So I can see why John Tracy Ellis would have said such a strong comment about the influence of John Henry Newman, soon to be saint.
Yes. And then, we also actually just finished a course from Leah Labresco Sargent on Christian community as leaven for the world. And I love that she did that topic in particular. I remember when we were talking about filming that course specifically, because something that we are trying to gear towards is actually starting to gather communities. And as our student base increases and the resources are available, we can start continuing to do those kinds of things. And I think she laid out just beautifully very practical ways in which, even at the very cell of the family, that small community grows in a way that is evangelical.
Yeah.
But she also provides very clear kind of directions on, like, hey, here's some ideas that you can do to build up community and invite people in that maybe are non-believers, and have it be just a good space where they can express themselves, and you're all kind of there just to enjoy each other as friends. There's not necessarily like a desired evangelical strategy. It's more of just like friendship.
Yeah.
It has to be the starting place.
Yeah.
So
Leah's course offered something somewhat new to our lineup of courses, and that's, with this focus on community, and she's speaking as like a fellow traveler, as a fellow pilgrim to the Word on Fire Institute members, as she takes them through her experience with evangelization in New York City. And she's also coming from the perspective of a former atheist. Was she an atheist blogger?
yes.
Yeah. And then, Yale graduate, and smart gal. And she had an adult conversion to the faith. And so she's coming from that angle. And so that makes a really interesting course. But I'm excited about the lineup of courses we have, because like if you're into apologetics, Dr. Christopher Kaiser's course on the 7 myths about the Catholic Church is a great course for you, or my course on reaching the indifferent. There's spirituality, like for those that are more interested in the spirituality based courses, like your course is really good on the principles, and then also your eventually your Thomas Merton course
coming out next year
be really good, and also this is the von Balthasar course from Bishop Barron, and Dr. Pagliarini's course on the scripture, and that was a really great course. I thought he did awesome. He's a Notre Dame Bible scholar who came out to Los Angeles and did this course on how to read the scriptures, but also in light of the fact that we live in a society that's becoming more and more dominated by the religiously unaffiliated. So helping us to read scripture ourselves, but also with them.
Yes.
So
absolutely. Another big highlight too for me was the course from Dr. Holly Ordway. It was a course that entitled Imaginative Apologetics, and if you've seen a lot of Bishop Barron's videos, articles, etc., he consistently mentions a lot of the people who were more imaginative in the way that they used apologetics. And so it would be like J.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, and even G.K. Chesterton used a different style. So she has a whole course on how they did it well, but then also how we can do it well. Particularly, I love the piece where she talks about the problem of verbicide today whenever we are using certain words in order to explain things. So, for example, the idea of faith, or even the idea of redemption or salvation, those have been so far removed from the original intent of what they were that perhaps whenever we're evangelizing, we need to revisit what these words mean with those that we're trying to evangelize, because they might have in their own head an idea of what that word means. And so it's kind of getting to the base of things to kind of build it up from there. Because once you have that right framework to understand the language, then you can move forward with how to use apologetics well. So, and of course, another big piece that happened over this past year is the Word on Fire Institute Journal. It's entitled Evangelization and Culture. We've actually got a copy here. And we've been working really hard on that. And Matt, I know you've been working with Todd and Matt and Elizabeth, kind of gearing that together. Of course, we all kind of came together, visioned it, and then move forward. And I think two of the big stars here are Roseanne Lee and Cassie Pease. I mean, the design of this thing is worth the price of admission by itself. So.
This journal is just amazing, and with the feedback we've been getting is incredible. It's just the perfect mix of academic and popular, so that whoever is reading it they're going to find something that really grabs them. And like the topics contained in there are so diverse that there's just so much there. And I found myself reading articles that I didn't think I would be excited about, and then finishing it to the end, which for me is a big feat, because I'm like one of those people that's really good at reading the first third of a book.
Yeah.
And then, which by the way reminds me of the managing editor of the journal, because Todd Warner is also one of those first third kind of guys when it comes to reading. Todd Warner is an internal medicine physician in Minnesota. And I had to think for a second there whether it's Minnesota or Minneapolis. That's the state. Like Minneapolis, Minnesota.
New to the States.
Yeah, exactly. But he's in Minnesota. He's got this busy practice as an internal medicine physician. And he came on board not quite a year ago, but he came on board fairly recently. And we hired him as the managing editor for this journal. So he's I've been a support person. I've been involved with the process, but really kind of from afar. Todd's been the leader. He's been the guy that's really pulled the strings and made things happen. I've had many meetings with him over Skype or FaceTime or whatever, with him sitting there with his Dots pretzels and Diet Mountain Dew, just ready to talk shop and figure out how we can make this most beautiful, most substantive Catholic journal out there today. And I think that he and the team has been so successful, largely thankful, like you said, to Roseanne and Cassie, who have just done amazing work.
And again, this is a quarterly journal that is offered exclusively to our Institute members. And so it's a continuation of the mission of the Institute, which is formation. And so, there's something about holding something in your hands and the beautiful articles. And as Matt mentioned, the kind of eclectic nature of it, that at times it might be more poetic. In fact, we actually have commissioned poems in here by professional poets. Yeah. And then we also have, academic pieces. In this one particularly, we have Reverend Malcolm Geet, out of England. And so, it's such a range. And then you have some that might be more just for the kind of daily thought, and then towards the end of it, there's actually some questions in there that within the Institute forums, we go in and discuss the issue and moving forward on how to better understand all of this, because, several of our members had said, some of these are so good, I want to read them several times to really ingest. And some of them are deep enough to get to that point. And one of my favorite in here is actually Father Paul Murray, who he's a poet himself. He's a great theologian, a mystic. And he has a piece in here that's just absolutely phenomenal. But
so much in there. I would be remiss to not mention Matt Becklow and Elizabeth Scalia, who are on the editing team, but also more importantly, they're both first class writers. And so they've contributed here. So they do play an important part on the technical side, but Matt and Elizabeth have also provided some phenomenal pieces to this journal and the one that's coming up.
Yeah, in fact, the one that's coming up we're going to share with you is actually going to be coming out in December. And of course, the topic for this first one is on creativity. It's something that is just part of what we are at Word on Fire, and part of Bishop Barron's kind of just modus operandi is to reinvigorate that Catholic imagination and the creativity that you see throughout the tradition of the church. And our next issue is actually going to be on the topic of economics. And the reason being is because Bishop Barron has been firmly, hold to the Catholic social teaching tradition. And so in this issue, we actually go pretty deeply into what does the church teach about Catholic social teaching. And it's got a range of articles, poems, numerous different things. Once again, it has an interview in there that I did actually with Dr. Arthur Brooks, who's been on Fox News, CNN. He was the president of the American Enterprise Institute for a while, for 10 years, I believe. And now he's at Harvard, one of the great economics professors of our time. But then from there, also kind of more of perhaps a spiritual understanding of economics, and always thinking of the poor. And it's a beautiful piece.
We have, in addition to that, we have like Gary Saul Morrison, who's like a world-class Dostoevsky scholar who's contributing to this second issue, and many other, here's the thing about the economics issue. I'm not going to lie. When I heard the next theme is going to be economics, I thought to myself, I'm going to keep this to myself, but that sounds boring. Because this is just economics is not my thing. But I've had a chance to read all of the contributions that have come in over the past few months, and it's going to be, in the words of Todd Warner, knockout good.
Yeah.
Or lights out good, he likes to say. So, but it really is this, this isn't a sales pitch when I say this, like a fluffy, empty pitch. I really mean it. This was not an issue that I thought that I'd be super excited about on a personal level, but I'm excited about it because the pieces that we have in there are all diverse and really engaging. So.
Yeah. Well, and another big addition to the team at Word on Fire is adding the Fellow of Media and our Church and Media, Mr. John Allen Jr. And of course, John Allen's been involved in media and journalism for 20 plus years. He's a highly, very well respected journalist that lives in Rome. And so he's somebody that is literally right there in the Vatican who reports what's going on with the church, what it's doing, how we're moving with things. And, we actually just released his first episode of the John Allen Show 2 weeks ago. And so his next one is actually coming out tomorrow. But he's such a interesting addition to the Institute because, part of what we want to do with the Institute is provide literally everything that can make you the best evangelist that you can be. So any tool that you can put in your tool belt to make you an evangelist. That's why our courses range so much, where sometimes we might be talking about psychology. Sometimes it's more spirituality. Sometimes it's actually sociology, et cetera. And with John Allen, with the addition of his talent, we're able to provide our Institute members, as well as he's got a public podcast where he's kind of just giving a report on what's going on in the culture and the church. But then he's also going to be doing, and of course his first one's coming up later this month, live Q&A with our Institute members, where Institute members can ask questions up front just in case they can't make the time of the live Q&A. But then also live, he'll be answering questions as well. So for our Institute members, at a time when there's a lot of confusion going on about, with the church and culture and what are we doing as a church, he's able to clarify so much for us. And I think that's a vital piece for an evangelist to understand how to speak about these things. They're going to come up, right?
Well, and I think that there's an important point to emphasize here, and that is that the Word on Fire Institute is not your parish. Like this is intended to form you, obviously, to go out, be the best evangelist of the culture you can be, and to live a life, spiritually and practically that really emulates what Bishop Barron stands for. And it's important for us to stay also on track with what's happening in the larger church.
Mm-hmm.
We want to be able to be great contributors to our parish communities, and on a bigger scale, we want to be the best contributors we can be to the universal church.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that one way to do that is to stay informed on what's going on, and sometimes what we hear isn't always what we want to hear, and sometimes there's great victories in the larger church that for me, I'm always so far removed from the current events, both in the church and just in the rest of the world. And there's often times where I'll hear something that's happened that is actually really exciting, and I'll be like, "Oh man, I've been missing out on this news for quite some time, and everyone's been talking about it, and I've been kind of missing out." So I think that John Allen Jr.'s podcast is going to be a great way to get a nice balanced view on what's on what's going on out there. So
yeah, absolutely. So he's yet another great addition to the Institute here. And then, of course, some of the highlights that are coming. What are we looking at for the upcoming year? And so we thought we'd share a little bit about some of the courses that we'll be launching over the next year. And one of the first courses we'll be doing is by Father Stephen Gadberry, who you might know him from American Ninja Warrior. He might be one of the fittest priests in the world. But we actually finally had a chance to meet him face to face. We had a retreat as a staff a couple of weeks ago out in Santa Barbara at Bishop Barron's residence, and Father Steve Gruno invited Father Gadberry to come out and hear confessions, and it was just an absolute blast. I mean, you just talk about a guy's guy and a fantastic holy priest, and
just so for everything he's accomplished, because he's an Air Force vet, he's obviously he's been on American Ninja Warrior, he's very well respected in the CrossFit community. And he's a great priest, and his parishioners love him. But one of the humblest men you'll ever meet.
Yeah, and his course is on the people you'll meet. So as evangelists, there's going to be such a wide range of individuals we might be meeting in our culture, even in our own families. Sometimes we have this wide range of the non-believer versus the very pious and very devout. There's such a range there. And I love that, like, right off the bat, the first person you're going to meet is yourself, So he's talking about kind of the internal spirituality and maybe some of the struggles that we have as evangelists going out. So be sure to keep an eye out for those announcements. Another one is also from Dr. Jennifer Frey. And Jennifer is a philosopher out at the University of South Carolina. And she has this fantastic podcast called The Sacred and the Profane. And as kind of a literary person, she's always talking about O'Connor or Dostoevsky or Walker Percy or, numerous different writers, but then always tying in the philosophy of it. And in this course in particular, she talks about happiness. So what does it mean to be happy? Because oftentimes, when we think as Christians what happiness means versus perhaps what the culture thinks happiness means. And so she's able to approach that in both a philosophical, but then also a very practical way on how to share what the church teaches about happiness and to use some of that kind of natural philosophy of the way a person thinks about happiness. So I'm really excited about that course as well.
She's really gifted in that. She's extremely intelligent. She specializes in the philosophy of St. Thomas Aquinas, Elizabeth Anscombe, and the rest of the analytic tradition like Ludwig Wittgenstein. And not easy philosophers to read and to learn, but she makes it easy. And I had a chance to actually be out there when she was filming. Once, Jared mentioned at Word on Fire, sometimes we get thrown into the fire. And on one particular occasion, I had to head out to Los Angeles, but this time to be on the other side of the camera. I know you've had that experience too, since Joe Glore was traveling with Bishop Barron at the time. So I had a chance to be in studio and help with the filming of Jen Frey's course on happiness. And she has such a great presence and truly a gifted teacher. So these are going to be some awesome courses coming out in the months to come. Yeah.
And I've also got a course coming out on Thomas Merton. I actually wrote my master's thesis on the spirituality of Thomas Merton. And so in large part, I'm kind of framing the course in how to understand the spiritual but not religious and use Thomas Merton's language to speak to that and kind of speak to it where it's at and rise it up. So kind of say, this is a good, the desire to be spiritual, but then to use Thomas Merton's understanding of the true and the false self, the idea of meditation, the idea of asceticism, all these things to kind of say, like that what you're experiencing and what you naturally desire is good. And let's rise it up to its highest pitch. And I think Thomas Merton just is such a good spiritual master for our time.
Yeah. You did a good job on that course. And like, for one thing, once on the behind the scenes side, like when you're filming, the first time you step in front of that camera and you're looking into the teleprompter and you've got all these, they've got the crew around you and they've got lights and they've got timers and they got cameras and it's really, it's a lot to take in at one time. You did a great job on your 8 Principles course, but your the second course, you were just a pro on film. But on top of that, what's interesting about what you did was Thomas Merton was an important figure because he showed us how you can go outside of the Catholic faith and find what's true and good and beautiful outside of the boundaries of the faith and take them in as your own, baptize them, as C.S. Lewis would say. Talk about baptizing the imagination of the atheist. But what you did is not only did you talk about Thomas Merton and how he used Eastern philosophies or Eastern religions sometimes to find insights into what we believe as Catholics, but you also mention a lot of times in your new course figures of popular culture, influencers like Bruce Lee or Jocko Willink, Navy SEAL, and others. So that's going to be a good course.
Yeah, it's recognizing those little, as Bishop Barron uses all the time, like seeds of the word, right? And so when we look at modern culture, what are some of those areas that even in our spirituality, we can recognize, that's the tradition that perhaps they're naturally desiring, and we can take that desire and again, rise it up, bring it up to its best pitch. So, and then we were also really excited. A couple of weeks ago, we actually just had another session of filming. And of course, Matt was there, Elizabeth was there, Todd was there. But then we also had Father Paul Murray, we had Father David McConey, and Dr. Stephen Boulevant. And I mean, that's a pretty big lineup that we're really excited about and about to start post-production for.
Yeah, world-class thinkers.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, Father Paul Murray, Bishop Barron calls him one of the greatest spiritual writers of our time. He really is. And his course is about the spirituality of falling in love with God and how that kind of forms us into better evangelists. And so, and of course, Father McConey, one of the great Augustinian scholars of our time, and something that perhaps our Institute members will really enjoy is the idea of Augustinian deification. So it's kind of introducing a much higher-minded understanding of the spiritual life. But I think Father McConey just knocked it out of the park.
Yeah. That's something we should talk more about, because often it's like treated as this Eastern idea, right? The idea originated, at least like the famous quote did, about God became men so that men may become gods, from St. Athanasius. But this has been, if you go into 2 Peter, you read in chapter 1, verse 4, that we're meant to be partakers of the divine nature. So this idea of theosis or divinization or deification, depending on what word you want to use, it's an amazing doctrine, but we often forget about it. So that's going to be a really great course as well.
Absolutely. And you talk about being kind of a way to express the gospel to the current culture. I think deification hits on something.
Yeah, a culture obsessed with like self-actualization and trying to become your best self, which is a good thing. But you need God if you're going to become your best self. So.
Exactly. And then, of course, Dr. Stephen Boulevant, who we actually had him on our summit earlier this year. And he's one of the leading scholars on this rise of unaffiliation. And so literally wrote the book on it, right? Called Mass Exodus. And he did a course for us on understanding the sociology of the unaffiliated. So how is it they think, and how are we supposed to understand these numbers, and where are they coming from? What are some of their beliefs? What's the range? What's the kind of base reality of the reason these individuals are becoming unaffiliated? And then he kind of follows that up with, here are some ways in which we can really start to kind of pinpoint how to reach those individuals.
He's got 2 PhDs, so he's also coming at that course not just from the perspective of a sociologist, but also a theologian. So
absolutely.
Good stuff.
Also, next month, we'll be having, in fact, our second Bishop Barron Presents. If you remember, we had Leah Labresco Sargent for our first ever Bishop Barron Presents. That was something we missed earlier when we talked about Leah. But that was a live event where we had Leah give somewhat of kind of like a TED Talk type style. And Leah, as a convert from atheism, was able to speak to the needs of evangelization in a very unique way. And then, of course, we also had behind the platform of the Institute, so exclusively for Institute members, a Q&A with Leah and Bishop Barron for a good 40 minutes or so. It's a great conversation. And our next big Bishop Barron Presents is coming up in November, so be sure to keep an eye out for that. And we actually have Dr. Arthur Brooks himself coming out to California to, once again, he'll give a presentation at the beginning that will be about a 20 to 25 minute talk, and then after that it will be a Q&A. I'll be hosting it, and it'll be between Bishop Barron and Dr. Brooks. And so if you want to see a moment of two of the great minds of our time, that's an opportunity that our Institute members get as members, that we'll be doing that again behind the platform of the Institute. So that's coming up in November. And then also, just to kind of guide this conversation, a lot of questions we get are about what is the Word on Fire Institute? What are the steps moving forward towards this idea of a movement? And there's a few things that need to happen in order for us to start gathering individuals into groups, to start providing a spiritual life, etc. And as our subscriber base, our member base, or our student base continues to increase, it provides these resources for us to start providing things back. For example, the journal and a continuation of these courses. Filming these courses is not cheap. It does take a serious amount of money to provide it at the level of production that we do. And so a continuation of building this student base so that as we move forward, then we can start gathering individuals in groups and start having them pray together, start offering them retreats, etc. And so it is still in the process of becoming a movement. In a certain sense, the movement has kind of begun because we're forming individuals in our ethos. We're helping them give a better understanding of Bishop Barron's mission, etc. But once you start getting boots on the ground, that's when things can really start happening, and especially because, I mean, the Institute already represents over 45 countries, you know, so we're already an international reality.
Yeah. Like online, it's just naturally and organically becoming something like a movement. And that was apparent just a few days ago with Bishop Barron's Ask Me Anything at Reddit. We had just this influx of Word on Fire Institute members coming into the Reddit forum to answer questions of the many skeptics that went there to meet Bishop Barron head on. So they must have got the memo on Instagram that I think some of our team members made just as a funny Instagram post that has Bishop Barron saying, "What is it? Come at me, bro.
And God bless you."
So we as an institute, it was really cool to see us all move in that direction online and really come and evangelize the non-Christians that and non-Catholics that went to meet Bishop Barron there.
Yeah. So there's also other, major stuff coming up that we have yet to get permission to start sharing. So be sure to keep an eye out, because there are some big things happening in the next year or two that I think all of you be very excited about. And being a member of the Institute, you get exclusive pieces of these projects that the public doesn't. So.
These are the things where I come to you before we go live and I say, can we tell them?
Yeah, exactly.
And then you say no, and then I hang my head and say, okay.
Exactly.
But eventually the time will be right. So stay tuned, become a member, because there's a lot of fun and exciting things happening at the Word on Fire Institute.
Yeah. In fact, now what I would like to do is give you an exclusive inside tour of the Institute. And so, again, to become a member of the Institute, go to wordonfire.institute. The cost is $27 a month. But again, we mentioned all of that stuff that you get, and all of those courses that we provided over the past year, they're still there. They're still there for you to go take, and the forums are still active and live. And then we continue to move forward with new courses, new live courses as we proceed through time. And so all of that stuff's there. Again, go to wordonfire.institute. You get this beautiful journal. You get the exclusive access to John Allen Jr. We have live Q&As with Bishop Barron on a regular basis. We have a lively forum. You also get access to Word on Fire Digital, which houses all of Bishop Barron's films and topical studies, as well as we mentioned, even things like this priest conference, as well as some exclusive talks that Bishop Barron's given. I think just recently he gave one to the Dominicans whenever he ordained a few young men into the priesthood.
8 friars, I think.
Yes. And so all of that is stuff that you get as a member of the Institute. And so for just a few minutes, I'm going to share my screen here and give you a quick tour into the Word on Fire Institute, just to kind of give you an idea of what we're doing. All right, so you see here, this is the front dashboard. One of the other exclusive pieces that our Institute members got was actually early access, as well as free access to the latest episodes of The Pivotal Players with Fulton Sheen and Flannery O'Connor. So this is the front dashboard. This is where you can check in on a couple of different things. For example, these extras that we have. So Bishop Barron just recently gave a masterclass on, I forget which book exactly, but in St. Paul, and we had a long discussion about it inside the forums. We also have, we just recently heard about the unfortunate reality of the number of Catholics that believe in the real presence, and so we did a little mini summit that has 5 different pieces inside there explaining what the Eucharist is, the apologetics of it, but then also the reality of parish life and the idea of the real presence, and then some very practical advice and prayer moving forward and how to increase your belief and your devotion to the Eucharist, which of course is our 8th principle at Word on Fire, which is grounded in the Eucharist. So here, again, this is the front dashboard, so you can see all of the courses that we've been doing lately. You've got kind of the most recent discussions. Again, here's a new member from Scotland. We got, all over from Washington, all over the world. And so again, we mentioned Leah's course here. We've got Dr. Kaiser's here, and we've got Dr. Pagliarini's here. And just to give you a quick peek at all of the courses we had mentioned, so here's the courses tab. Here's where you can go in and actually click on any course you want to take, and you can start the course right away. And each course, of course, comes with this the beautiful video lesson. We also have the transcripts available for you to download. We have a study guide that includes a brief kind of introduction, but then also some reflection questions, as well as questions that we ask inside the forums. We also have the MP3s, just in case you want to download those to your phone and listen to them on your drive to work or while you're mowing the yard, etc. We also, each lesson really has some extras. We also have a lot of recommended books with each one of our lessons to better understand the material. And of course, the fellows page, this includes all of our fellows, and we actually need to do a little bit of updating on it, but this includes a brief biography of all of our fellows, as well as the courses that they're teaching. And of course, the community, which is such a vital and beautiful piece of the Word on Fire Institute. And of course, when you first join, we ask you to introduce yourself, maybe share a little bit about yourself, your faith journey, who you are, where you're from. That way, we just kind of get a good understanding of who our students are. We've got general discussion here where people can talk about the culture. They talk about, evangelical work that they're doing. Probably my favorite piece of this entire forum is this prayer requests page. It's where all of our members can go in and ask for a special prayer request for anything that they're asking for. And they don't have to share everything if they don't want to, just, ask for a special intention for my brother, or a special intention for my aunt, or, for buying a house, etc. I mean, there's numerous different things going on there. We also have, as I mentioned, at the back of the journal, we have questions. And so within the Institute, we have an area where you can go in and join those. We also have the course discussions. So each one of these has the questions and continued discussion around each of the courses. And then back to the front dashboard, you also get, as a member, you get digital access to the journal. So here's where you can go in and update, just in case you move, you can update your shipping address. But then you also get a digital access to the journal itself, where you can go in and read the articles, and just the beauty of this thing is astonishing to me. But you can also, as Institute members, you exclusively, so this isn't open to the public, you can exclusively get more copies. So say you have friends or family that you would like to buy a copy for, we sell it very cheap for our Institute members, and you can go in there and enjoy that. Another piece, this is, I think, a major piece, is access to Word on Fire Digital. So again, this is the entire body of Bishop Barron's work in films, and so feature films, topical studies, but then also talks that he's given. For example, this Thomas Aquinas commencement speech that he has. Speaking of John Henry Newman, right? We've got the Pivotal Players episode on John Henry Newman. We've got the entire Catholicism series. We've got the Catholicism New Evangelization, all of these topical programs, as well as I mentioned, here's the National Conference for Priests. Really anything that we've ever created, you have access to as a member of the Institute. So that alone is worth quite a bit, and we want to give you everything we can, again, to make you the best evangelist you can be. And then also bonus resources. So this has like the Leah Bishop Barron Presents that Leah came to. And then we also have our own Robert Mixa just recently gave a webinar on Augustine's advice to catechists. So we have that entire recording in there for you as well as numerous different interviews. We also have a couple of pages where, if you hear Bishop Barron mention René Girard, well, who is that? What did he think? What are some of Bishop Barron's other pieces that help understand who René Girard or Hans Urs von Balthasar is? You also get a free ebook library as an Institute member. So again, this is just all of the things you get, as well as all the other things that we've discussed during this webinar. So it's well worth the price of admission. And, we really, let me turn this, there you go. We really hope to just, invite you to join the Institute, join this kind of groundswell of people who desire to evangelize, right? We are now facing, as we played Bishop Barron's video at the beginning of this, we're now facing a place where among the young, we're looking at about a 50% rate of unaffiliation. And so what we're trying to do by the grace of God and by the grace of prayer is to help stem that tide, right? Help the church fulfill its very nature. I always love Evangelii Nuntiandi that says that evangelization is the nature of the church, right? That's what we exist for. And so what we're trying to do is through this effort to form you well on how to evangelize in the culture at large, but also in your families, in your parishes, at the bar, at the gym, wherever you're going. You can always share the grace of Christ and share the gospel of Christ. And so I guess if I was to just kind of send off one last thing, it would just say, please pray for us. Please, we cannot operate without prayer. And so even if you can't join the Institute, please offer your prayer for us. Matt, any last words?
I think you said it all, but I would just say it's been a pleasure to meet a lot of people through this project, through the Institute, and I would just, I'm looking forward to meeting many more of you. And it's just been a year full of blessings, and really looking forward to seeing what the next year brings. So thank you everybody for supporting the Institute and being a member of it, most importantly.
Yeah. All right. Well, everybody have a great day. And as a Texan should say, God bless y'all.